In this presentation, you will be learning about the cell membrane and how various particles pass into the cell and out of the cell. The cell membrane is selectively permeable. This means that some molecules can cross the membrane without problem or help needed, while others cannot. The cell membrane is also referred to as the plasma membrane. It has four main functions. It can control what goes into and out of the cell. It provides the cell with structure and support. The cell membrane protects the cell contents, and it receives signals from other cells and helps identify other cells. Your first keyword is the. Remember when we learned about the four macromolecules? One of the functions of lipids was to make up the cell membrane. The main molecule that forms the cell membrane is the phospholipid. It creates two layers to act as a bilayer and is called the phospholipid bilayer. Bi means two, so think of bilayer as having two layers. The phospholipids have two parts to them that help them form the phospholipid bilayer. The hydrophilic head is water attracting or water loving and always faces the outside of the bilayer, and the hydrophobic tails are water repelling or water fearing, and these always face each other on the inside of the bilayer. The hydrophilic head is made of an alcohol and a phosphate group, while the hydrophobic tails are chains of fatty acids. Remember that fatty acids are one of the monomers of lipids. Your second key word is concentration. In the plasma membrane, phospholipids can move sideways and allow water and other small molecules to pass through or into or out of the cell. There are also other molecules that make up the cell membrane. Another type of lipid in the cell membrane is cholesterol, which helps make the membrane more fluid. Proteins are also embedded in the phospholipid bilayer. The protein channels help aid in the diffusion of molecules into and out of the cell. They can also be useful in cell recognition. Many of the proteins and phospholipids have large molecules, like carbohydrates, attached to them. These carbohydrates have many functions, which includes using proteins to help move across cell membranes. Your third key word is gradient. This is a great video to give you a visual to show you the flexibility and structure of the cell membrane.
Between the living machinery of the inner cell and the harsh conditions of the outside world stands the cell's plasma membrane. As crucial as this barrier is, it's surprisingly flexible. Push it and watch it move. Poke hard enough and it might break and begin to regroup. The lipid molecules of the membrane naturally assemble in a double layer because their tails repel water as their heads attract it. Throw in some cholesterol and a few carbohydrates, and you have the basic structure of a plasma membrane. Within these lipid molecules, we also find different proteins which do various things for the cell. For instance, they receive signals from the world outside, or they transport nutrients and waste. So nature composes the membrane with a combination or mosaic of different lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins. And these molecules are not stationary. They constantly move within the structure, fluidly changing their positions. The survival of all life rests on this veil of material. A supple membrane, just 2 molecules thick.
Now that you have learned about the structure of the cell membrane, we are going to look at how different molecules can transport across the membrane. Your fourth key word is is. There are two types of transport, active transport and passive transport. You're first going to learn about passive transport. Passive transport is the diffusion of molecules across the cell membrane. Diffusion means that no energy is needed for this to happen. This is used to move molecules from high concentration to low concentration. High concentration to low concentration flows with the concentration gradient. Passive transport continues until concentrations reach equilibrium, meaning both sides of the membrane have the same amount of molecules. Specific molecules that use passive transport are carbon dioxide and oxygen gases and water. You can think of the concentration gradient like a hill. The top of the hill is high concentration and the bottom of the hill is low concentration. If you're riding your bike downhill, you can just kick your feet off the pedals and fly down that hill. No need to do anything, so it doesn't require any energy. It's a lot like moving from high concentration to low concentration. And this is passive transport. On the left side of this diagram, you see simple diffusion, where molecules on the blue side move right through the membrane to an area of lower concentration on the pink side. The right side of this diagram shows you another type of diffusion. It's important to remember the difference between the two. On the right side is facilitated diffusion, where you see the molecules using a protein channel. Here, molecules use a protein channel because they are too big to simply move through the membrane on their own. You still see the molecules moving from high concentration to low concentration, so no energy is required. Osmosis is a special term to describe the diffusion of water molecules across the cell membrane. Because it is a type of passive transport, it is moving the water molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, so they will move with the concentration gradient. This will continue until concentrations reach equilibrium, then water moves in both directions across the cell membrane at an equal rate or speed. Your fifth key word is like. There are 3 different types of osmotic solutions where there is some sort of solute present. On the far left-hand side, you see a hypotonic solution. This is where the cell has a higher concentration of solutes than the solution. Water moves into the cell to equal out the concentration. In the beaker, there's a red blood cell. Here, the red blood cells burst, which can lead to cell death. On the right-hand side, you see a plant cell because of the green cell wall. With the plant cell, it's filled with water, and this is the ideal tonicity for plant cells, which makes it turgid. In the center, you see an isotonic solution. Here, there are equal concentrations of solute inside and outside of the cell. Water continually flows in and out to keep this concentration balanced. In the beaker, the red blood cell is healthy. This is the ideal tonicity for animal cells. The plant cells are not filled with water, so here there is no turgor pressure. On the far right side, you see a hypertonic solution. Here, the cell has a lower concentration of solutes than the solution, and water moves out of the cell to equal out the concentration. In the beaker, the red blood cell begins to shrink, which can lead to cell death. In the plant cell, you see the plant cell shrinking away from the cell wall. The cell membrane pulls away from the cell wall, which can also lead to cell death in plant cells. In this type of solution, you might see a plant cell that's wilting. Now that you have learned about passive transport, we can learn more about active transport. In this type of transport, molecules require energy that comes from ATP. This is used to move chemicals from low concentration to high concentration, so they are moving against the concentration gradient. One major example is the sodium and potassium protein pump. This is also used to move molecules that are too large to move through the cell membrane easily, like glucose, starch, and other big biomolecules. Your 6th key word is just the letter A. A. Let's think of our concentration gradient as a hill again. If you are moving from an area of low concentration at the bottom of the hill to high concentration, which is the top of the hill, it requires a lot of energy. Think about pedaling uphill. You need to pedal hard, and that's active transport. In both images in this diagram, you see ATP providing the energy needed to help the protein pumps move chemicals from low concentration to high concentration. Here's a hint. If you are confused about what concentration means, it is referring to the number of molecules in a given area of amount of a liquid. For example, 10 salt ions in a milliliter of water has a higher concentration than just 3 salt ions in a milliliter of water. Your 7th keyword is steep. To help you understand the different types of transports, it's important to know about transport proteins. Transport proteins are embedded in the cell membrane, and they are responsible for picking up molecules from either the outside or inside of a cell. They then carry them across the cell membrane. They are used for molecules that are too large to move through the cell membrane on their own. In transport of high concentration to low concentration, the use of a protein channel or carrier protein is called facilitated diffusion. And in active transport from low concentration to high concentration, a protein pump is required. Endocytosis is a type of active transport. Part of the cell membrane surrounds materials in a vesicle and carries them into the cell where they are released inside. This is used for molecules that are too large to move through the cell membrane and proteins. It's also used to engulf food. Your 8th keyword is Hill. Exocytosis is where part of the cell membrane surrounds materials in a vesicle and carries them out of the cell to be released outside. Just like endocytosis, this is used for molecules that are too large to move through the cell membrane and proteins, and it uses energy for active transport. This is also used to remove waste and worn out or old organelles. So this is the end of our presentation. You just learned a lot of new information on the cell membrane and transport. It would be smart for you to use your notes for the upcoming assignments. Finish this video by entering the keyword sentence.